Hello, good people. Usually on Mondays and Fridays, I upload discussion videos or rant videos, and I was going to do that again, but I'm very well aware that a lot of the time those can come off as very negative. I mean, I'm critiquing the game, so it's kind of natural that it comes off as negative. Instead, because it was kind of just going to be a rant about the latest patch and how goddamn bad it was. I think we all know how bad it is, so let's talk about something else. The next chapter is going to be revealed in about 2 weeks. And I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody who wants to be surprised, but through a bunch of leaks and everything, it's very certain to be a specific character. That's cool and everything, but let's look at who I'd like to see in the game. Some of my most anticipated and wanted chapters, shall we? Be a little more positive this day. Now, I have pretty much one ground rule, and that being I'm going to, for the most part, ignore exceptionally popular licenses, i.e. your Friday the 13th, as much as I would love to see FNAF in the game, FNAF's not on the list. I know that people wanting that one specifically is kind of controversial, but it's a little too big, and with pretty much all of those licenses, even if there's some sort of legal issue with them, it's mainly just a matter of when, because they're so big. So ignoring those, what are the 5 licenses that I want to see in this game above everything else? And this isn't just a chapter list. I do have a singular paragraph on the list. Okay, starting off with what would probably be a paragraph is Dead Rising. One of my favorite franchises ever. I love this game, especially the first two. The original Dead Rising and Dead Rising 2 are some of the most fun games I've played. Now, the obvious choice for this would be Frank West as a survivor being brought into the game. As to what you do for his perks, obviously all about being a photographer. Fucking obviously. I would love to see something where like he blinds the killer with his camera. I don't think we'd really see that, sadly, but it would be fun as fuck. Although somebody else that we could get Chuck Green from the second game. And I think Chuck could actually be very interesting, because for anybody who doesn't play, or hasn't played Dead Rising, the second game's whole sort of gimmick is combo weapons, where you find certain weapons, you bring them to a workbench, and then you combine them. An interesting thing you could do with that concept, if you bring in Chuck Green, or if you bring in Frank West, if you really fucking wanted to, is have it so you can combine items to recharge the item you're holding. So like if you have a green toolbox, you search a chest, you find a brown toolbox, you can combine them and replenish 6 charges onto that green toolbox. Very fun shit you could do. There's also a bunch of like acrobatic moves and shit you can do in the game. So if they ever wanted to add drop kicking the killer, this is the chapter to do it. Am I right, or am I right? The only downside to this would be, it only being a paragraph. But it would be a pretty damn fun one. I'm not gonna lie. And there's a lot of people who love this game. I mean, it's a decently popular franchise, although nobody really talks about it being in the game. And I think that's purely because of the fact that there's not really a killer you can bring along with it. Although, we've been seeing a lot of paragraphs lately, so maybe, just maybe, as a mid-chapter surprise, we can get a fun little chapter out of it. Now, while there's not much to talk about in the land of Dead Rising, at least in a broader sense, I could obviously sit there and talk about perks and powers and shit for all of these chapters. I'm not going to do that, sadly. I just don't want to spend, 40 minutes doing that. But a chapter that there is a decent bit to talk about would be a pretty popular indie game that's been circulating around the last, when the hell did this come out? A few years, I think, is Fear and Hunger. A very challenging, punishing, and frankly depressing game that would have a lot of characters to choose from, both as killers and survivors. Now, Fear and Hunger would have to be a full chapter, and who better to be the killer than the Crow Mall? One of the most iconic enemies from the game, a terrifying enemy. One of the first times you see him, for a lot of players at least, is he's referencing Pyramid Head, where he's just standing on the other side of bars at the end of the hallway. And then something that could tie into gameplay is most people probably first faced him when, for anybody who hasn't played Fear and Hunger, every time you try to save at a bed in the game, there's a 50-50 chance that you will have to face an enemy, depending on where there's some save points and shit, you know. But at a specific one, I forget the name of the area it's in, not gonna lie. At a specific one, you will have to face the Crow Mauler. And he can be a terrifying fucking enemy when you first play the game. He obviously has this massive serrated arm weapon. I don't know, just maybe might be his primary weapon if he was a killer. I don't know. But more importantly than that, he actually has a peck attack that instantly kills whoever it hits. Assuming it doesn't miss, obviously. Assuming it actually does hit. Yeah, instantly kills, decapitates one of your party members. Very scary enemy to go against when you're first playing the game, don't really know how to go against him. Which would make him... And not only that, but he's also iconic when it comes to Fear and Hunger. Well, it may be a little more of a niche license when it comes to DBD. Really haven't seen anybody talk about Fear and Hunger. It would be sick having him in the game like that. Having a peck attack that either has him lunging forward or something for an extended range, or insta-downs in some way that he has to charge up, and then either having beds around the map or having it so you could just teleport to generators, where if survivors use them in some way, maybe there's some sort of like paranoia meter, sort of like Doctor, and you have to use the beds to get rid of it, but then you can teleport to them, similar to like a Pinhead sort of situation. I feel like there's a lot of cool shit you could do with this character. And on top of that, he's a very grotesque creature. So considering the fact that for body horror we have, what do we have? We have like Doctor, kind of, Dredge, and the Unknown, if you count that. I don't know if you would really want to count that. He's more of like a cryptid type thing, not really like body horror. Depending on who you count, there's probably like maybe 3 or 4 body horror characters. With how grotesque the Crow Mauler is, with his arm being a blade, being half bird and shit, could be a great entry into the sort of distorted body horror type of side of the horror genre that we could add to the game. Now, I said chapters, so there would have to be a survivor. Just have your pick of the adventurers, whoever you think would look cooler and be coolest in the game. You want the mercenary? What do you want? The little girl? Add a child to the game behavior. Whoever you want. Just there's a plethora. Not to mention, for perks, there's a shit ton of spells, weapons, items, and shit you can find in the game. So there's a ton of shit you could make into perks and like have references to on the survivor side. On top of that, I think bringing in indie horror as a genre is something we need. For all of those reasons, and probably many more, Fear and Hunger is close to the top of my list for licenses I'd love to see in this game. Probably above some of the things like It and Friday the 13th. Maybe not Friday the 13th, but definitely It surpasses quite a few things. Thirdly, actually, moving on to a more popular license, a much more popular license, is Outlast. One of the best horror games, especially to come out. I mean, it's not really recent years anymore, but one of the better horror games out there. And one of the ones that you can actually bring in quite a few different characters. You got Chris Walker, you have Doctor, you have whatever the ghost is called. I'm drawing a blank right now, not gonna lie. You have a bunch of options. Not to mention the fact that all these options give you many different sort of ways you can imagine the character. Like if you want to add Chris Walker into the game, he's a big hulking brute. You could have him charging through walls and pallets, insta-downing survivors or slamming them to the ground, dealing health states and shit. Have him just be a big brute. You could have somebody like the doctor guy. I'm blanking on names other than Chris Walker. I don't know why. But you could have the doctor, and he like lacerates you, inflicting like a bleeding status effect on survivors. Or maybe he's able to use his massive scissors to sort of dismantle pallets and make them fragile, or go through breakable walls faster. Or if it's the ghost guy, just phase through walls. Why not? Just you kind of have they kind of would have the freedom of Pyramid Head if they went with the ghost. As for Survivor, obviously the main dude you play as, with his camcorder, he'd probably it'd either be something that's like always on him, just like as a reference to the game, or more interestingly, incorporate it into part of his perks, make him do something with them. On top of just the sheer variety of things you can do with an Outlast chapter, it's also just the fact that it's one of the most popular horror games out there. Especially like modern sort of horror games, it's one of the most popular. Honestly, it might be the most popular. So I'm kind of surprised we haven't even heard talks of this being in development, or them being in sort of cahoots with Behavior, or anything like that. It's honestly kind of surprising, because it's really big up there, but not many people talk about it, including Behavior. Guys, please. Outlast is huge. Bring it in the game. Now, we've talked about 3 video games. Let's finally move on to a movie. Now, obviously, very obviously, I'm clearly talking about Sinister. Alright? I have seen nobody talk about this, and I don't know why. We need more psychological horror type characters in this game. We do. Out of the whole roster, I think maybe 2 I'd categorize as psychological horror, one of which being Unreal, obviously. And then, depending on how you look at it, maybe Doctor. Maybe. We need more. So add Bagul to this game. Behavior, please. And then this would obviously, assuming they could get the correct licensing for it, this would bring Ian Hawke into the game, which would be pretty fucking funny. Although, as for Bagul, like I said, we need more psychological horror in this fucking game. So having a character like him, a ghost that fucking has this super strong like haunting on these families and shit, and like possesses their kids and kills them in grotesque ways, would make for a great power, I think. Giving them the creative freedom that they had with Pyramid Head to make a amazing power, I think, ooh, there's so much potential here. And well, I can't really go into that potential because it's pretty much endless. Like I said, it would be like Pyramid Head, where they just cook something up that fits the character and then ship it out. It doesn't really have to even link into the movies or anything. It just has to be cool. But let's move on to the last one, the last license, which is Easily the biggest license on my list, and the only reason it didn't fall victim to the one rule I have of not doing insanely huge licenses is because it is literally my dream license. This is like, it's one of my favorite series in general. Been a huge fan of it. It's The Walking Dead, baby. I've wanted this in the game since I started playing it back in like 2018. I have forever and will forever be a Walking Dead fan, and I need it in the game. Bring in Rick Grimes as a survivor. Let him shoot the killer. Fuck balance. Let him do it. Bring in Negan as a killer. Bashing people's skulls in. Just tearing through breakable walls and pallets. Bring him in the game. Now, if they didn't want to do Negan, they could do other things. Like, I've seen people suggest doing like a horde of zombies as the killer. You could do like beta from the Whispers. You could do beta or alpha, either or. You could do somebody like the Governor. There's a bunch of options. Not to mention the plethora of survivors you can have, both as actual survivors or legendary skins. Literally dozens of characters people like. Obviously, you got Rick, you got Daryl, you got Michonne. You know, you could even technically do Negan as a survivor as well. He does become a good guy later on. Although, if you make him a killer, that idea goes out the window. So, depends on how they want to go with it. I could see The Walking Dead also being a paragraph where they just add in Rick, or maybe they add in 2 survivors. They do like Rick and Daryl or Rick and Negan, something like that. But I think this chapter, this license as a chapter, would shine so bright and be so cool. It's obviously also extremely popular, so it would definitely make behavior tons of money. Which is why it probably should have fallen into that initial rule I made. But I love it too much. It's my list. I get to break the rules when I want, and I break it for this. The Walking Dead, easily my dream license. Bring it into the game behavior. So with that all being said, I will have to end it here. If you guys have dream licenses that are very different from these, maybe they're more popular ones, maybe you think this list is complete bogus and none of these licenses would work and they all suck, whatever it is, leave a comment telling me what you think. Like, subscribe, as always. I really appreciate the support. We're growing pretty damn fast, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. With that being said, I will see you guys next time.